Good morning. Welcome everyone. My name is Beth Scott, and it's my pleasure to be here with you today to talk about the Common Core State Standards. As you may know, this training is designed for classroom teachers, instructional specialists, and building leaders. And we will all benefit from taking a deeper look at the critical role that text plays in the Common Core standards. As we work together today and spend our time together today, we're going to look at the key aspects of the new standards for English language arts and literacy in history and social studies, in science, and the technical subjects. We're going to examine the language of the standards, and we're also going to model research-based strategies to engage students with text. And through it all, we're going to take some wonderful ideas that we're going to share here today that we can take back to the classroom. What is our goal today? Our goal today is to help you support, engage, and support all students as they interact with text. Not just any text. We're going to look very closely at the role of content-rich, complex text and how it's going to help prepare our students for the next generation assessments and for success in college and career. Now, the next slide is going to give you some information that's going to indicate to us or show us the importance of this. I'm sure this is information a lot of us may already be familiar with, but I'd like you to take a few minutes just to read this information, and then we'll have an open discussion. But before I do that, are there any questions about our goal today? Very good, very good. Glad to hear that. Very good, very good. Yes, we will. Thank you. Okay, so let's look at the next slide. Take a few minutes to read over this, please. Now, I know you get some key information from this, the gap. The gap whether the reading demands in college and workforce has stayed steady over the last half century or increased. But in the classroom, K-12, there's been a decline. And as that decline has taken place, and the other, whether it's here or here, there's that gap that we need to do something about. These conditions have left the gap, it's such a serious gap for our high school seniors, as indicated there, in terms of their reading ability and the reading requirements that face them after graduation. Remediation courses in college, we find students not being successful to read simple instructions to fulfill a task in the workforce. So what is our goal today in talking about filling this gap, or closing, I should say, closing the gap? One of the big shifts in instruction with the Common Core States standards is focusing students on content-rich, complex text and building deep understanding by asking questions and developing tasks. So it's how we engage students in interacting with text, how to gather that information, comprehend that information, evaluate it, synthesize it, and then do something with it. So our goal today is to look closely at those tasks, those strategies that we're going to help build tasks that will require students to close read and to look for evidence in the text. In order for students to gain a broader, more coherent understanding of a subject, the Common Core State Standards emphasizes fully the importance or the need for reading text closely. And we're going to talk about that today in reaching our goal. So you might ask, what is close reading? Close reading involves focused, sustained reading and rereading of a text for the purpose of understanding key points. Gathering information, as I said before, and that information is evidence, and building knowledge. When students read closely, they give the time and attention needed to fully understand information in a text and then be able to do something with it, be able to use the specific evidence from the text. So as we start with text, we're going to talk about the importance not only of building those strategies to close read the text, but it's the instructional materials that we choose as teachers. That's quite important too. So our role in selecting text instructional materials is key. We're wanting to look for the role the materials is going to play in supporting the task of close reading. Students will be motivated if the materials are of high interest, so we can't leave them out. You know, I remember reading just recently that the 3 emphases that we're going to look at is the materials, the text, the student, which is very important. Their interest is important. We want to entice them to read. That's important. We want them to we want them to be inquisitive, and we want them to read carefully because something is sparked in them to read it. They have an interest. Okay? And then the task. So we want to make sure that we're giving them text-based discussion questions that allow them to draw evidence from what they're reading and prompt them to then begin to use those high-order thinking skills to synthesize, to evaluate what they're reading, and then be able to report back, whether it's an oral report or a written report. Any questions at this time at the importance of close reading tasks to begin the process of closing the gap? Very good. That's important to emphasize, because at times scaffolding is going to be needed, but it's temporary. We want to make sure that we are not taking away the student's ability to begin working independently. So we don't want to scaffold. So your model of the strategies is very important. Step 1, model that expectation. We want to enable students to read at a level required by the Common Core standards. We don't want to keep holding them back and saying, well, they can't. We want to do away with that. But all students should experience the level of text complexity. That's important. All students. We want to make sure that we're giving all of our students that ability to experience text complexity. That's part of the requirements of Common Core. The Common Core state standards has the anchor standards, and they call them the College Core Readiness Anchor Standards for Reading. And these standards are for K-12, where we want to emphasize that we give students questions during the task portion of their reading, where they're analyzing individuals and events and ideas in a selection. We're going to do away with how we tell them who the character is, what the main idea, or pull a word and give a definition. We've done a lot of that. We want to go a little deeper. We want our students to analyze the individuals, their motivations, the events, and ideas from the selection. We want them to look at central ideas and themes of a text. And we also want them to evaluate the arguments and the specific claims that are made in a text. And that's going to come from that step process of modeling it and then selecting those information and those materials that's going to lead to the student's ability to read closely. Any questions? And as indicated here, that 3-step plan is a very important one to keep in mind. And that's going to help us close that gap. So the Common Core state standards, this is another piece, and if you will allow me to read it, the Common Core state standards expects a level of text complexity to increase every year of a child's schooling. As students become more adept at close reading, their knowledge about a subject grows, and they are able to integrate new knowledge with previously learned ideas and concepts. This is a skill that will serve them as they progress toward college and career readiness. Now I want to emphasize this because this is that part that's going to close the gap. And in emphasizing it, I want to share that it starts at kindergarten. I remember modeling a lesson with a group of kindergarten students, and it was wonderful the way they began to look at Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf in a different way, because we were analyzing the wolf's motivation and Red Riding Hood, her claims and what her goals as she was moving through and making her going through the process of that story. Am I going to do this or am I not going to do this? Oh, how would this story be different if she had done it this way? That's really getting the kids to go deeper in their understanding. That was a lesson that was modeled. The kids then could use that model in another story that they had to read. So we want to model the expectations for our students. We want to give them that content-rich text, and we want to be very purposeful in the materials that we choose when getting them to read closely. So looking at the next slide, I want to emphasize that the Common Core State Standards is internationally benchmarked, it's grounded in research, and it's clear and specific in its goals. And it's quite rigorous, because our goal is to prepare our students for that ultimate measurement, which is done using the next generation assessments. We've had many groups or organizations working together. You may be familiar with the timeline as it relates to the Common Core Standards, starting with the Council of Chief School Officers and the National Governors Association. The standards, as I indicated, is internationally benchmarked. So as a group working together, one goal was that it was researched and evidence-based. Another goal, it's aligned with college and work expectations. Going back to what I said, it's internationally based. So a particular standard was only included when the best available evidence indicated that its mastery was essential to college and career readiness in the 21st century. So there's been some real significant work done to put these standards together. It is a culmination of an extended, broad-based, and I want to emphasize a broad-based effort to fulfill the charge issued by the states to create the new generation of K-12 standards that will help ensure that all students are college and career ready in literacy no later than the end of high school. And we begin that process immediately in kindergarten as a natural outgrowth of the meeting of the charge to define the college and career readiness. The standards also lay out a vision, and this vision is important because it is what it means to be a literate person in the 21st century. What it means to be a literate person in the 21st century. The skills and the understandings that the students are expected to demonstrate have wide relevance outside the classroom and in the workplace. We want them to have that relevancy. We want them to be able to apply what they've learned and be challenged by the sophistication of the language that they're going to be introduced to outside of school. So we have to give it to them. We have to give them that content-rich text during the K-12 cycle of their lives. The next slide is showing you the process in creating the standards, and I've already mentioned the gathering of the chief school officers and the governors, the National Governors Association. What I want to emphasize on this timeline is the next generation assessments. Very different from what we've done in the past. And we're going to talk more about that as we move forward. Any questions about the creation of the standards and the motivation for focusing on content-rich text and how that's going to serve the needs of our students moving forward? So there's some guiding principles I'd like to share with you in relationship to the standards. It says fewer, meaning overcoming the crowded curriculum. No such thing as more is better. I agree. Thank you. Clear, students, teachers, parents, and administrators understand the expectations. So it's not just the teachers and the principals getting in, the parents are just kind of getting the students' explanation. It's a full effort that everyone share the clear, specific understanding of what our goals are. And yes, higher. We're raising the bar significantly for all students. And in building the college career standards, I want us to look at this next slide because it shows us, it breaks down, and I want you to look at it closely and ask questions. It breaks down the college and career standards, and then it breaks down, you see it for English language arts, and you see it for the literacy and history and the social studies, science, and the technical subjects. And know that the technical subjects, we're looking at music and art, we're looking at technology, yes, very good. And then you have mathematics. And then you have below that you have your grade specific standards. This next slide breaks it down and you can see it by strand. So we have a comprehensive K-5 section in the standards, which is your reading strand, your writing strand, your speaking and listening strand, and your language strand. Any questions about the strands? The comprehensive part, and as you go through that, you can see that K-5 section is called the comprehensive section of the standards with those 4 strands. Then you have your 2 content area specific sections for grades 6 to 12. And for ELA, there's reading strand, writing strand, speaking, listening, and your language. And then you have your history, social studies, science, and technical subjects, reading and writing strand. Reading. Very important to keep in mind. Yes, you're right. That content rich and the way we process that for our students. Here's another slide I thought I put there for you to continue to deepen your understanding of the Common Core standards. The design and the organization of it is key. So in this explanation, you see the 3 main sections that I mentioned earlier, and you have the K-5, which is cross-disciplinary, and we'll explain it in that way. You have your 612 English language arts and your 612 literacy in history, social studies, science, and the technical subjects. Is that easier? Yes. For me, the first time I looked at it, that's easier for me to understand because I'm seeing clearly the K-5, and then I'm seeing how the literacy in history, social studies, science, and technical subjects, how it's broken in its own section, and then I have my English language arts section. Very good. And the continuum from kindergarten to 12th grade is pretty phenomenal. It's a wonderful step process to keep deepening, raising the bar and deepening the knowledge. And then of course your 3 appendices are wonderful places to go to get your research and evidence information. And it's a place to find your glossary of key terms connected to the Common Core standards. And then at Appendix B, you'll have your performance tasks, those tasks that I mentioned earlier that we want to make a part of our everyday practice when exposing our students to or having them interact with text. And then you have your writing samples, which would be Appendix C. Are there any questions? So as you look at the glossary of key terms, and that's in your Appendix A, it's quite helpful. And keep in mind to the website there where you can get this information. Okay? And then as you look at the next slide shows you Appendix B, and here we can find the design and the organization of that ELA content literacy section. And then here is your information for Appendix C. Any questions? I know that was probably 3 or 4 slides that was the same information but organized a little differently. Was that helpful? Very good. Thank you. Very good. And believe it or not, yes, I have another design and organization which will help us look very closely now for those of us who are more mathematical or artistic. This one shows the standards for English language arts, K5, and it shows that reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language strand. And then I like this too because it shows us that when we're looking at text and looking at that content-rich text for students, we're looking at informational text. Yes, we want to make sure, and we've probably not done enough with that. But informational text is key there, but literary text is also key there. So we want to look at the informational, and I talked about Little Red Riding Hood, that's literary. But there's ways too to get them to gather that information and synthesize that information and be able to put it into a format where they're deepening their knowledge and then being able to share their knowledge. And then of course your foundational skills, which are at the earlier stages for our students. And so now we look now at the 612 and the foundational skills, because they've now progressed from those early ages of needing phonemic awareness and the phonics. And yes. And so now we have the informational text and the literacy under the reading strand. Now, understanding the ELA framework is key and important. So I want to emphasize to you the importance of reading through the standards and looking very closely at the strands and understanding the importance of including the foundational skills in the K5 and how we pay attention to that while students are interacting with text. And knowing that the writing is a part of that strand supporting the students' interaction with text. The speaking and listening, when I said earlier, what are we asking students to do after they're reporting? They gather, they comprehend, critique, evaluate it, synthesize it. Now what do we do with it? So it can be an oral report, or it can be something that you've done and you want them to then share out from their task of having listened, or whether they're listening to you or to their teammate who is giving the report. And then you have the language strand. Are there any questions? Okay. So what's not in the strand, the standards, I'm sorry, I'd like you to take a few minutes and look at that and share with me any thoughts you have pertaining to any of those bullets that indicate what's not in the standards. Very good. I like her point. The point she was making is that you look at bullet 2, all they can and should be taught. They're leaving a lot up to you to. Very good. That's a good point you've made. Very good. Very good point. Thank you. Ah, yes. Another good point. I like that. Very good. The interventions needed for students well below grade level. Because we talk about scaffolding, we're not leaving that out, but we still need to give them the exposure to that level of building them to that level of independence as well. Everything students need to be college and career ready. Is that possible? Very good, very good. No, it's not. Very good. Any other comments? Good comments, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, very good. So we talk about the next generation of assessments, or I'm sorry, the next generation assessments. And we know it was developed with the gathering of the states coming together. And at the end of the year, it's an end of the year summative test, interim formative test. So the Common Core talks about the qualitative and the quantitative measures. This is a part of that qualitative and kind of ongoing formative assessments. That's the qualitative, ongoing. We're going to make sure we're always doing those interim assessments. A variety of question types and performance tasks. Looking at Appendix C, you will see a variety of examples or samples that will support your building those or supporting students with those various tasks. Quite a bit of information taken from these two, the consortia of Smarter Balance and the park, we refer to as park. So we want to also keep in mind that technology is key when working with our students. Collaboration, whether it's written or spoken, but on the computer, working together in twos or threes or fours, depending on the structure of your task, is key for students. Because the next generation assessments is using computer-based technology. Okay. And it's implemented in 2014, 2015. So it's on. It's a part of our world, and embracing it and beginning the process now will stop any delay and begin to close that gap. In order to align assessments to the Common Core state standards, the two SBAC, which is a Smarter Balance Assessment, and the partnership for, I believe it's a partnership for the assessment of readiness for college and career. They worked together and formed a task with the development of the new assessment design. And these are the two primary groups that we should be familiar with. So the websites are there for you to read, to access and read a little bit more about their work in developing the assessment design. Any questions? Any questions? The assessment is going to be key, and not only it's going to support our students tremendously, but it's going to support us too. I like the last slide, because it said we are all in this together. I believe we are. I believe that, I know we are. I know that the strategies, those research-based strategies that we're using to engage students with text, the joy of using those performance tasks and allowing students to make connections and work together is going to be key, because it's going to strengthen us as well as teachers as we begin to develop those lessons and select those materials to strengthen the reading abilities of our students and to close that gap. I thank you for the time today. We are all in this together. It's my pleasure to have had this time to talk with you and a little bit about text and its importance to our new standards. So if there are any questions, I'm here. I want you to feel free to come up at the end of the session, because I know others have another session to go to. I'm available. Thank you so very much.